I like Micaiah because even though he was talked to that he should lie, even after he kind of did, then he was questioned again and he answered with the truth of everything that he had said. And he still ended up in jail on bread and water. So that somehow just doesn't, it's kind of a can't win no matter what you do here.
I think it's interesting that Micaiah told Ahab to go up and he would deliver the city to the hand of the king, but he didn't say which king. So, kind of skirting around the issue, and then until he's finally called on and said, "Hey, tell me the truth."
Um, although Micaiah, uh, did tell the truth. I mean, the authentic prophetic word is verified by what, like what the prophet. If the prophet said what the prophet says does occur, then that verifies that he's a true prophet. So it does show that he was definitely a true prophet. So to bring that into today's world, though, let me read the word today. Neither the king of Israel nor his chorus of religious cheerleaders would tolerate a challenge to state authority and policy. Micaiah's description of a level of decision making that superseded and thoroughly neutralized Ahab's authority could only be answered with violent resistance. Micaiah's word, the word of the Lord, must be silenced. Zedekiah struck Micaiah and mocked his prophetic authority. The king ordered Micaiah thrown in prison and put on starvation rations of bread and water until such time as Ahab would return from the battle. I did not find anywhere where it gave you what happened to Micaiah when Ahab didn't come back. But that's my only question on going through all of this. Now my question is what is said here. How little has changed since the days of Ahab and Micaiah? And not to pick on any political party, which I won't get into that discussion. But over the past number of years, I noticed a lot of times when an advisor, which I'm going to use the word advisor in today's political standings, would tell the truth to the person in power, and the following day he'd be fired. Now, I don't know if anybody else would agree with that, but I saw a lot of that over the last couple of years. Like,
Absolutely.
It's like, no, I don't like what you said, so you get out of here.
Yeah. There's and you hear the phrase "speaking truth to power" quite a bit, and nowadays it takes a courageous person to do that, to actually speak the truth to someone who has power over you, rather than just be a yes man or a yes woman, and just tell them what they want to hear. Those 400 prophets were induced to tell Ahab what he wanted to hear. And when can you get 4 people to agree with something, let alone 400?
I mean, they were just giving lip service, and that was what they thought they were supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So can anybody think of a time when they just sort of said what they thought the person wanted to hear. And yet knowing that it really wasn't what should be done.
We're all married, right?
Hmm?
We're all
What was,
married, right? Haven't haven't you said something to your spouse
Well
because of
said.
you? Or am I the only one?
oh, trust me. Um, actually, I can't say that lately. That's one thing that Jack and I are good at, is saying exactly what we're thinking. Does that come with the 40 years that we're going to be celebrating this year?
Probably, yes.
And even at that, I do remind him that, yeah, but you told me. And his comment to that always is, yes, and women remember everything that happened 50 years ago.
Oh, yeah. And where men have selective memories.
Very true. I know this doesn't have to do with, well, it does and it doesn't. I am a big Blue Bloods fan, and last night on the new show that was on, I mean Friday night, the police commissioner was talking to a down and out drug, and person having problems with drugs, for drug addiction, and the person with the drug addiction was talking about things, and Frank asked her something, and she said, yes, and Jamie helped me through that. God only knows why. And Frank said, yes, God does know why. And I just thought that was like a super powerful statement coming from the police commissioner to a drug addict. And it made me think of a lot of things happening today where, because of a few rotten cops have gotten a bad deal. And that bothers me. I know it bothers me because my son-in-law is a police officer and does a lot of good. And I know a few of them in the department. It just, and I had a few of Philly's finest friends too. And yes, there are bad ones out there, but there's bad ones in every group.
Yeah, I think there has to be some sort of change in policy or hiring practices where if a police officer is let go by one precinct or jurisdiction and gets hired by someone else, don't they vet this person to see why they're in a job market? I think that, along with training on how to de-escalate things. Look, and not only police, but it seems like the Wild West out there nowadays. I mean, every day there's at least one shooting.
Yeah.
And not necessarily by police. It's just people with guns just shooting
Yeah.
indiscriminately, and it's really concerning to me. I mean,
Well, like the one at Wawa last week up in what is Northampton County.
Yeah.
I mean, just pull up to a Wawa and start killing people. I mean,
Yeah, there was one in Wisconsin last night, and in another state, I forget where. It's just I don't understand it.
sometimes I do feel that some of the problems are people who are trying to commit suicide by cop.
Could be.
I mean, to start shooting at people indiscriminately means a police officer is going to shoot you. Like somebody who, I mean, that's part of it. Because that's what they're taught to do.
Well, yeah, if you point a gun at a cop, it's not going to end well for you. That's for sure. But I think there needs to be some sort of common sense gun control. Who needs to have an automatic rifle in their home? Are you going to defend do you need 50 shots to defend yourself for a home invasion? It's crazy. My manager had Friday afternoon. He took Friday afternoon off. There's a gun show up in Split Rock, he said. Well, then he proceeded to tell us that he has 4 automatic pistols. He has 2 AR-15s. Well, okay, he's a gun enthusiast and he likes to go shooting. My solution for automatic rifles is to have them at gun ranges. And if you have this overriding desire to shoot one, go to a range and pay to shoot one. I don't think you need one in your home because if you have teenage sons, maybe they'll grab it and go shoot somebody. I mean, who knows? But yeah, I don't know. I guess
Well,
got a tangent there, but
even with that, Chris, we knew a guy in Philly who, at times, he transported reasonably large amounts of money. So he had a permit. He had a carry permit. He had everything legal. And somebody tried to take him out for the money that he carried the one day, and he pulled his gun out, and that guy got his gun away from him and killed him with it. So
yeah.
Anyway, yeah. As far as So, going back to the word today, in September 2011, a protest rally occurred in Zuccotti Park in the Wall Street financial district of New York City. I don't remember that
one. I don't either.
The point of Occupancy Wall Street was to criticize the income equality between the 1% of the population that controls most of the wealth and the other 99%. Protesters hoped to reduce the influence of corporations on government, reform banks, and have student loans forgiven. Some months later, the protest was quelled by police in riot gear. With all the protests that are going on in today's world, and I am not by any means saying that people don't have a right to protest. They do, through and through. But maybe because in the 60s, I followed Martin Luther King Jr. day by day. I have a couple heroes, and yes, he is my hero. I would have been down in Washington, except I had babies in the house at the time. The whole idea of all of the anger getting to the point that a protest becomes a riot. Martin wouldn't allow that to happen with his people, even though a lot of his people got beat on. And it just bothers me that there can be that much. One of my favorite sayings is, anger is 1 letter short of danger. And that one I gave to my kids many times because I have a violent temper. which I haven't seen in years and years because of that saying. Okay, in May 2020, George Floyd, an African-American man, suffocated to death beneath the knee of Minneapolis police officer. Floyd's death precipitated nationwide Black Lives Matter protests that are ongoing at the time of this writing. The reaction of too many authorities to peaceful protests has thus far included tear gas, rubber bullets, arrests, and the force of the US military personnel. Yes, it has. And back in the 60s, they were using the high-powered water from the hydrants and things on people too, to when things would get out of control. If we go back to January, when Washington had the problem, I mean, they weren't ready for that, and people died because of it. I just think that too much of the lying factor, the being told one thing and people doing the opposite, is a bad thing. It just,
And I think part of the protest is that the Black Lives Matter protest. Whenever there's a cause to protest, whether it be an unarmed shooting of someone and then people go out and protest, there are the fringe who take advantage of that and kind of put a black mark on the protest by being violent, by looting. So a demonstration turns into a riot. And I suppose there were people on January 6th who were just there to support the president, but it seems like 85, 90% of them were bent on violence. So I don't know. It's hard to sympathize with the movement if it turns into riots, because that always ramps up the other side of the story. Well, look at the Black Lives Matter. They rioted and looted, and no one said anything about that. And Washington were just trying to right a wrong, even though it was all based on a lie that the election was stolen. So that's what's even more tragic about that whole thing. And they're still trying to overturn the results now in Arizona. So it's crazy. What a world, as the Wicked Witch would say.
but what can we do about it? One of the questions is, what word of truth might God be urging the church to speak about the following? And that's race, poverty, immigrants, income disparity, hunger, or the environment with climate change. I look at that question and I really have a huge blank in my head, because the comment about 1% of the people are in control of the wealth, most of the wealth. So that makes us all 99, part of the 99%. So what can we do? Micaiah told the truth. But then there's the question, what is the truth?
I think this is a snowflake analogy, Mary. That we, like one little snowflake, we try and do our best to speak that truth, whether it's to power or even to ourselves. inform ourselves like this class, and as you're saying, as you're watching the news, as you're watching Blue Bloods, to recognize the dynamics that are at play. It's not enough to just, it's important to speak out to friends, to loved ones. It's important to take to social media. It's important. Again, this week I was writing to my elected officials, some of whom I agree with and happily vote for, others I strongly disagree with and do not vote for, and they keep getting in office anyway. I think it's important to keep that dialogue, to keep reaching across divisions of ideas, that there are things that are really, really out of whack and broken. And I have power because of the color of my skin. I have some power because of my vocation, and it's important to use that power. Am I going to change something nationally? Maybe not. No, but I do add my voice. I financially support Lutheran advocacy in Pennsylvania and nationally, and I think it's important to keep reaching out in those little ways. One little snowflake doesn't make much difference, but you get a whole lot of them. It can bring things to a halt.
I mean, all 6 of those issues are so important: race, poverty, immigrants, income disparity, hunger, and environment or climate. They're all pertinent today, and all. I mean, I don't know if one is more important than the other. I mean, hunger and poverty go kind of hand in hand, and income disparity kind of creates poverty and hunger.
Yeah.
And if we aren't paying attention to what we're doing to the environment with the air and the water, then our grandchildren and great-grandchildren are not going to live in the same world that we're living in. And I don't know how you get people to understand that when science is telling you that there's not that many more years to go at this pace. And
I sometimes wonder if personally I think I do some silly things about the environment. Let's see, we live here 4 years now, and we have planted 7 trees in the yard. It's like, can one drop of water fill a bucket? I guess if there's enough drops of water, it can, but when I remember when I lived in Philadelphia, but I worked in Norristown, I used to take the way to get there. I always used back roads, and I would turn off of Stenton Avenue, and I forget onto what the road was, but you went from the church atmosphere to down a road that the trees were so old that they covered over the road. And the minute you were under those trees, I could breathe better. So my asthma wasn't an issue. And, and I just felt that the trees would help.
Sounds like Wissahickon Avenue.
Really? I know it went like you turned off Stenton and you kind of went down the hill, and there were the trees over top, and it was like 10 degrees cooler, and you could breathe better and immediately. And that's when I started thinking trees are helpful.
But I think, Mary, maybe that the author is giving us an opportunity to recognize that find something in which you have a passion, because we cannot all do everything by ourselves. That's not how the body of Christ works. So you have Pastor Anya, who is passionate about the environment, and you have Susie Vogt, who's passionate about emotional support and service support animals. And you know, I think it's important, and I'm good at this. I'm kind of spread out in the things that I care about deeply, and I don't make as much of an impact on any of them because I'm spread out so much. And maybe that's part of the encouragement, is to find as a congregation, as individuals, where our heart is, where our passion is, where our gifts are, where our voice is, where our power is, and use that for the good.
I think ELCA has some really good outreach programs available for things that you might be passionate about, where you don't have to feel like an individual going totally against the world by yourself. They do have advocacy streams, and they can direct you and tell you what it is that they're looking at, so you can support that then, or you can not support it depending on what your feel is, but at least you don't feel like you're by yourself.
Well, and probably the smallest of ways, in our envelope packages, we have envelopes for world hunger. Contribute to world hunger. It doesn't take anything but writing a check.
As well as for like when natural disasters happen and things like that,
Yeah,
there's a place where you can give for that. So that, like, if a tornado goes through somewhere, everybody's upset and they want to give money right at that time. But it's not just at that time that people need the money. That goes on for a decade before everything is rebuilt when a natural disaster comes through, sometimes longer. So supporting that fund gives some financial support so that when it's needed, it can be distributed as needed, because we don't know that.
Right.
What do you do if you don't have the ability to be making donations to things like that would help?
I think it's not all financial. You need to look in some of the feeds that they have, and they tell you things you can do. I just, as Pastor just said, getting in touch with your elected officials and letting them know how you feel seems like it's only one person, but it doesn't take more than like 15 or 20 people to get in touch with a local legislator before that theme comes before them through the staffer who has to deal with it. And then they hear about it. Now, it may be that they set it aside, but it'll come back again if you keep reinforcing that. So, I mean, just like sending an email or sending a letter or making a phone call can make a huge difference.
I completely agree with Kathy, and I think that with our voting, with our finances, with our voices, with our actions, I mean, what we do for Mary's shelter is huge. Mary, the way that you make and show God's love is a remarkable gift that not everybody can do. So I think, as Kathy said, each of us have different ways that we give gifts, different ways that we connect. Having a conversation like this, this kind of conversation does not happen in every church setting. It doesn't happen in every work setting. It doesn't happen in every family setting. So I think it takes all those different layers of intention, information, advocacy, and action. We need all that stuff combined together.
And I think it's really important to just share that passion with each other. If there's a theme that you think you need support, you open your mouth, talk, ask questions. And if other people feel that way as well, then you have one or two other people who can work with you to try and make a difference.
Is that getting us back to speaking truth and power?
Mhm.
Kind of scary. Kind of important.
Yeah.
I think it helps too when the folks that are in power are open to truth and honest dialogue. Is you already covered that earlier in the class. But it does make a difference if folks are ready to listen and willing to listen or not. It takes a different way of interacting. I have a dog that really wants to be in the midst of this conversation.
Mine are playing at my feet.
Where do you see Zion's fees as, God urging the church to address some of the pain in our society? Where does Zion's fees land on any one of those 6 topics? Is there one that we're particularly attuned to?
Maybe hunger. We help with the food pantry in Olney. That seems to be, something that we do. And it doesn't seem to be anything that becomes controversial within the congregation. People give willingly. They give to Mary's Shelter. That's not exactly hunger, but it is kind of, because they just don't have it. So that kind of borders between income disparity, I guess, and hunger and poverty. Those all kind of like flow together. But I think, through our social outreach, we give willingly. When we were face to face and we used the jars of generosity, that was a really good project. And then we could share that financial gift as people saw that it worked well. It's a little hard to do virtually, though.
I think additionally to what I'm hearing you say, Kathy, that with Mary's Shelter, some of those moms have been kicked out of their homes or in essence kicked out of their families, and they're creating different ones. And so I think in addition to addressing the needs that you've named, that there's some other needs that encouragement and that love is touching as well. So we have a lot of kids that are trans or homosexual that are also kicked out of their homes or feel that they're not welcome. And that's a significant portion of the homeless youth right now are in the LGBTQ community. And that's a similar to Mary's Shelter. It's young people that are trying to start in the world on their own with a pretty shaky first step.
That's really a hard thing because when my first granddaughter was born back in the 80s, soon after Nicole was born, my daughter came to me because her best friend was expecting and her parents threw her out.
Mm.
And I looked at Ronnie and said, "Where is she?" And she said, "I'm not sure." I said, "Find her and tell her to come here." I said, "You have to share your room, and 2 babies and 2 girls in the same room is going to be a tight squeeze, but she'll have a place to stay, and the baby will have a place to stay.
Seems to me that was an original Mary's shelter.
I loved raising my kids in Philadelphia because they learned so much, and there was always people there. My son's friends would come to my house, and teenage boys and drinking can drive you nuts, but they knew that they could come to my house if they had gone out drinking, and they'd come to my house. And my only rule was that if you're going to be sick, you make it to the bathroom or you will clean it up. My usual comment when Johnny would show up would be, here's a pillow, there's the floor, here's a blanket, get some sleep. And one time he asked me, he said, why don't you ever yell at me when I come to your house? And I just looked at him and said, can't you see at that point that your body is yelling at you, not me? I said, at that point, you need to get straight and don't do this stuff. But they would come to me, not to their parents. I don't know why.
Well, you didn't judge them. That's why.
That brings up a really important dichotomy that I think is the questions of this week's class too. That sometimes judgment is necessary if you're the advisor and the king's actions are unjust. It's important to speak truth of judgment. Important to speak that truth of accountability. At the same time, Mary, as you're pointing out with really powerful personal experiences, that there are times when we don't speak judgment in order to build that trust and that relationship and that rapport. But I do hear you saying, when your body's yelling at you, there's recognition that he could be making different choices, and it's okay to talk about those things. And I think, as Kathy mentioned, that when we as a congregation are working with folks that are having the pain of hunger, that does not bring a lot of controversy. And I think some of the things that we do in church, we do that don't bring controversy, but do bring a lot of healing. I think there might be times when we have some controversy. I suspect COVID and vaccinations and restrictions might be one of those little forays to dip our toe in. There's not going to be a happy medium. There is not one answer that fits everybody, but it is a path that we need to find our way on. And I think that there are things where we're going to step on each other's toes, and there are other things that we can wholeheartedly embrace without any pushback at all, because so many people are passionate about helping our brother and sister.
Okay, how about we just close up now with closing prayer? Let us pray. Lord, give us the courage of Micaiah to speak your word to power, and if we must, to suffer the consequences of speaking truth. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I'm
Thanks
up
very
next, right?